Hello, welcome back to Books and Budget. This is Eve. I am going to do a quick little kind of review, or really more of an overview, of the beautiful Russian Vintage Classics editions. There are 6 of them in total. And you'll notice this is actually the first video that I'm posting on my channel that is about books. So far, the other 3 videos that I posted have been more budget oriented. And actually, when I was starting this, my husband was asking, like, why would you make a singular channel for both of those things? So I think that my answer to that going forward, because they aren't necessarily related, except that they are just 2 things that I'm interested in. So I'm going to say if it's in the books or on the books, it's something that I'm passionate about. And I really do love literature. I like nonfiction as well, but I just wanted to kind of dive in and do both. And frankly, my budgeting impacts my ability to buy new books. So whenever we are on budget and have money saved, I'm able to, lean in a little bit more to this hobby of mine, which is reading. So I just wanted to give this kind of a little layout overview here, but I'll actually go into each of these individually. I'm going to move them over to the side, just to show you the design, show you the, publishing style, all of that jazz. So we'll start with War and Peace, because that's the big kahuna, and go from there. So this is actually a very thick book. It's kind of hard to tell from the angle that I'm filming this at. This is the only one of the 6 that I've read this edition of. I intend to get to the other 5 in the next, probably, I'm thinking 2 years. I'll explain kind of my priorities for reading them. But this I read it must have been 2018 or 2019 from this edition, which is why you can see, if I kind of zoom in a little bit closer, you can see that there is some wear and tear. I read this over the course of almost an entire year, so it is a little bit beat up. This is a paperback copy, and it's seen better days, but I'm glad that I read it from this edition, just because it was so beautiful, and it's flimsy, it was easy enough to read. I thought that the font size here, actually, let me zoom in a little so you can see better. The font size is a good size. So here is my hand, and for the record, I'm a very tall person. So I have very long fingers, large hands, but more like, average man-sized hands and larger woman-sized hands. But the way that these all work is they'll have, their own unique design, and then when you open it, they have beautiful, oops, let me zoom back out, sorry, I just realized I'm still zoomed in very closely. They do have French flaps with a lovely design on the interior. I included an Ex Libris sticker, so I'm actually going to skip over that, because that includes some personal info. You have the annotation information, other works by the author, not in this edition. These 6 are the only 6 that were made in this release. And I think this release came out probably in if I were to guess, I'd say 2017. 2007 seems incorrect. I think that's like when these translators translated this book. Is it Richard Pevear and Larissa Volokonsky, I would guess. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the pronunciation of their last names, but you'll see that they have split this up in kind of the standard fashion. There is an introduction here, written by, if I'm not mistaken, the translator, yes, written by Richard Pevear. It includes some principal characters as well as their relationships to one another. So they're divvied up into, family, which was nice. I actually, when I read this, just had a sticky Post-it note as like a bookmark for this section, just so I could refer back to it a lot easier. And then you dive into the text. There are footnotes, which actually I liked. So this edition kept the original. So the way that Tolstoy wrote it, He wrote the text in Russian, but with French written throughout as well to demonstrate that these wealthy, almost aristocratic family members were well-traveled. They were very international, cultural, and they spoke French in the home as kind of a status symbol. So they do have translations, and it's mostly just translations of the French throughout the book. The rest of it, anything that was in Russian is English. The French is all that stays the same. And you'll actually see there's some German here too that also gets translated. But for the most part, there aren't a lot of heavy footnotes. It's just translation. And then when you get to the back, the text ends, for the record, on 11:25, excluding the epilogue. If you include the epilogue, it ends on... And you should include the epilogue, for the record. That is part of the story still. It ends on... Oh my goodness, it just keeps going. It's been a while since I read this, so I forgot how long it is. It ends on 12:15. So if someone were to ask me, like, how long is that book? I would probably say 1,200 pages. We do have an appendix that provides some additional context for the writing as well as the naming, because the Russian naming system works different than much of the rest of the Western world. You have your own personal name, which can have nicknames. You have your second name, which is indicates who your father is. And then you also have a family last name that carries down. We also have some notes from the author. And then additional notes that are more historical or contextual notes. So the footnotes in the text are just language translations, if I'm not mistaken. And then the notes, the end notes, are providing historical context or sometimes like idiomatic context. So for customs that might not be clear to a modern reader or a non-Russian reader. And then we also have a historical index that provides some individuals, historical, like real historical figures that get referenced through the book, as well as a summary of each section. So, or more or less each section. So kind of like, this is like the quick notes, like the Spark Notes version, Cliff Notes at the end, basically saying like, here's the highlights of what happens. And then a little brief history of Vintage, their website. And then as you can see, the 6 items, or the 6 books here. Okay, so that's my War and Peace. Oh, and at the back it says, "Let the dead bury their dead, but while I'm alive, I must live and be happy." And it's been a long time since I read this. I think it's been almost 6 years, I think. But if I'm not mistaken, that was it Natasha that says that? I think it was Natalia. I could be wrong. It's been a while. The Countess. So anyways, that's War and Peace. I really just, if you're curious about the story itself, it's actually quite an easy read in terms of the language usage. And this translation is really solid for a modern reader. I didn't have difficulty with understanding what was going on. It's just that it's so hefty that it takes a while. That's why it's a challenge. It's not that the text itself is difficult. There's a few sections, I think, especially when Pierre, who's one of the main characters, especially when he's kind of going on a soliloquy, like a philosophical soliloquy, he tends to have monologues about religion and philosophy. Where is he? What's his name again? Yes, Pierre. So Count Pyotr Kyrillovich. And anyways, what I was saying before about the names, by the way, so his father is Count Kirill, and again, sorry, I'm not Russian, so this is totally butchering it. And then his son is Kyrillovich, so his personal name, Pierre, the Kirill, like son of Kirill, and then this is their family last name, Bezhukov. So everyone has that. So the father here, Ilya, all of the children, their second name is some iteration of that. So Ilyinichna, Ilyich, I'm sorry, Ilyinichna, to demonstrate if they're a boy or girl, but you get the idea. Anyways, okay, sorry, that was a long-winded explanation, 10 minutes to just War and Peace, but that's the only one I've read, so that's going to be the one that takes the longest time. The next is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, so same author. We have the spine here, and by the way, these look really beautiful on a shelf together just because of how intricate and patterned the spines are. You'll see they all have the sort of like Russian red throughout as like the main color of each of the books. The French flaps here include, so the main pattern from the cover gets carried over onto the French flap, and then the interior of the French flap is the border. And then this font is actually a little bit bigger here. I think War and Peace, they had so much to cram in that they didn't have many places to go. But I would say like that's a pretty solid font size, and the margins are wide here. They don't go too deep into the crease because of the flexibility of the books, which vary, for the record. Some of these books are more flexible spines than others, which I find interesting. But in any case, they are comfortable reads. Like I don't feel like I'm breaking the spine when I kind of curl this page. Again, we have some notes here at the end, if I'm not mistaken. Let me see. Maybe not. This edition goes to page 963. And then no notes, just blank. And then we end again with the same beautiful end pages. And the quote, "All happy families resemble one another. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." I have not read this book, so I don't know if that is said in jest or not, but it's a great line regardless. It kind of makes me chuckle. I think this is the one that I'm looking forward to reading next. Although, I mean, I've read one Tolstoy of the bunch. This is his probably next most famous work. And I'm like, do I want to read 2 Tolstoys before I get to Dostoevsky or any of the other authors? I don't know, but this is kind of the one that I'm leaning towards as my next read. And I will show you how all the spines look at the end when they're all stacked up together. Next we have Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The spine, I think this is my favorite of the spines. I just like the black and white accent here. And I really like the font. I don't know, something about the font choices you have. It almost looks like, the author wrote in their name. Like they wrote this with their pen and ink and then signed their name. I think that's a really nice touch. We have again, continuation of the main cover onto the flap, and then the interior is this beautiful, almost paisley floral. Ex Libris again, and then, and this is also, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, the translation of this Anna Karenina is, let's see, Louise and Aylmer Maud. I don't know enough about these translators to be familiar with the quality of the translation, but this Crime and Punishment is the same translators as the War and Peace of the same edition. Again, solid font size here. I think that's a pretty comfortable font size for when you're reading at home, especially when you get into the sections that are more less dense prose and more conversational. It's a nice font to read. I think the kerning is good here. It's not too bold. That's something that really bothers me about, I want to say it's Oxford World Classics. I just feel like it's like really thick letters, which is a weird way to phrase it, but I don't know. These are thin, and they are thin enough that it feels neat without being so thin that it's too faint to read. So this, with including the epilogue, is, oops, lost it, 522 pages. And then we do have a small section for notes at the back, which appear to be contextual notes as well. So that's very nice. So in total, 532 pages, and then we get just the history of vintage again, and the back flaps. Oh, this is interesting. I wonder if this is... I'm wondering where this kind of blackened edge came from. This does seem to have a crease. I've never read this book, but I'm seeing a couple of pages. Maybe it was shipped that way and I'm just noticing it now. In any case, it's no skin off my back to have a single page look dirtied. But yeah, this is it. And then we have the back cover, which says, "Freedom will no longer be dear to him. He'll fall to thinking, get entangled. He'll tangle himself all up as in a net. He'll worry himself to death." That's interesting. I'm assuming that has to do with the punishment part of the Crime and Punishment. This is, if not Anna Karenina, this is probably the one that I want to read next. One thing I want to note here, so I mentioned that Anna Karenina is like 900 pages, whereas Crime and Punishment is in the 500s. They look pretty similar in size. So you can tell that they've adjusted the font, and I think in some cases the thickness of the paper, in order to accommodate more font than paper. But just FYI, they are not the same fonts for each of these editions, which is unusual, but anywho. Okay, next up we have Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. Another great, I like the orange incorporation in this. So they all work together without being the same patterns carried at all across the editions. We have the flap again carrying through the original pattern, and then here's the end paper. Oops, got a little stuck there. This is translated by, the old duo, Richard and Larissa. And this is one of the ones I was saying, like the paper seems thicker here. It's not as loose and bendy in the spine. So I'm gonna have to do that old tried and true trick of like taking a page at a time and sort of slowly loosening up the glue, so as not to break the spine, because this is how far this wants to go without me really pushing it. But anyways, here's the font size. This seems a little bit smaller font than some of the other editions that we've seen. So to compare, I'm sorry, my hand's in the way a little bit, but I'm trying to do my best. This is a bigger font, more rounded. I think that the actual font itself is the same across the editions, but just the sizing of it. This is also slightly larger. Anywho, okay, moving on. We have, let's see. Oh, and it looks like in this one, I didn't notice it across the rest. The chapter name is at the top of the page. And then, yeah, this is really tight comparatively. Let's get to the epilogue. So it ends on page 461, and then it goes into the poems of Yuri Zhivago, which is one of the characters, I believe, in the book. And then when that wraps up, we are at the notes section. So a small note section again. Let me get to the end here. A few blanks. And then this classic history of vintage. This one just doesn't seem to be as good of quality to me. You can actually also see here that the glue of I might actually do something about this, because when I read this edition, I don't want it to wear away faster as a result of the glue not being fully evenly coated on the back, or on the spine, excuse me. But anyways, here we are. This is a quicker read. I mean, this is only 500 pages, so it won't take too long. And then the back says, "They loved each other because everything around them wanted it so. The earth beneath them, the sky over their heads, the clouds and trees." Sweet. Or maybe I know nothing about this story, and so it'll end up being rather dark. Who knows? And by the way, these all have a very, very light intro. Most of them indicate if they had any sort of banning in the Soviet Union, which quite a few of these did. For one reason or another, due to censorship. This is visually, I think, the most... Actually, let me show you kind of both of these together. It's interesting, the other 4 editions are so much more floral, and then these 2 are geometric. It's kind of like the old and the new. These do give off slightly more of like a communist Russia vibe, whereas these give off more of a, I don't know, pre-revolution. Like just the floral has more of an aristocratic style. I'm not sure if that was intentional. I feel like Dr. Zhivago, I don't know enough about this story to know when it was set. I thought it had something to do with Siberia, which would make me think like a family sentenced to Siberia, but maybe I'm totally making that up and it's set pre-revolution. Anyways, I'm gonna dive into The Master and Margarita here. An old story about an old cat. This was just damaged in shipping. This is, no one's fault, but just the shipping process. And also, like I said, I've had these books for years now. So they've gone through a couple moves and they're bound to get a little beat up, but that's okay. We have the continuation of the pattern. And then this is kind of an interesting end page. I think this is my least favorite of the end papers. It's just this design is just not it for me, but that's just my own personal preference. It's reminding me of something anatomical that I don't really feel like needs to be the center of a design, but, or at least not this design on a book that has nothing to do with that. This is translated from the Russian by Michael Glenny. We have a quote from Goethe, and then the book begins. This is a good font size too. Again, here's my hand. This I don't know. The margins are much smaller on this than some of the other books, but because the font is so large, it doesn't really faze me. And then in the back, where are we? This is, I think, the shortest of the bunch at about 370 pages, 371 pages in total, including the epilogue. No notes. I mean, this is the most novel-y of the novels. It's not really like a historical fiction in the same way as the rest, right? I haven't read it, so I don't know for sure, but from what I know. And then manuscripts don't burn, as the quote on the back. And then last but not least, and I'm saving this for last for a reason, Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. I would have picked this up next, except that I realized that this is technically, although it can stand on its own, the sequel to Stalingrad by Vasily Grossman, which includes some of the same characters kind of continuing on in their lives after the Battle of Stalingrad in, was it 1942? Am I making that up? 1945? I'm forgetting now the year, but I'm still reading that. And that is not in this edition. These are the only 6 books in this edition. I'm reading that in the New York Review of Books, the NYRB edition, and it's about a little under 1,000 pages. I think it's like 936 pages. So anyways, I would have read this one next, except I found out that it is not a standalone. It can be. You don't have to have read Stalingrad to read this, but I'm sort of a completist, and I wanted the full story and the background on the characters for the context. This is sort of giving me like Russian spy, James Bond, like pulp, spy novel sort of design. It's pretty cool. And I believe this is what happens to the, is it Shaposhnikov? Shaposhnikov family after the war, their lives in the army, the Gulag, Physics Institute, etc. Grossman, at least in Stalingrad, you can really see a very strong influence from War and Peace. He clearly loved War and Peace, but wanted to make the sort of communist World War II version of it. So it follows some similar trends and kind of approach to the narrative and storytelling, and how he follows so many characters, but the base is this one family and their in-laws and offspring. I'm not liking it nearly as much as I liked War and Peace, but that's partially because I'm just not interested in like physics and material engineering, which does get covered quite a bit. We have, this is translated by Robert Chandler. We have an introduction by the author, into info about the text and translation, a few books about Stalin's Russia and about Vasily Grossman. So this is a little bit more involved, which is interesting to me. We have a map of the Battle of Stalingrad and the kind of moving German front. And then we dive into the text. And this text also looks different to me. I'm just noticing this now. This text is a little bit more similar to those Oxford classics, where it's got that kind of thickness to it that you don't see in the other editions. Here, so let me compare. It might not be noticeable enough on a camera like this. Yeah, I'm not sure that's really picking up, but to me, this is a thinner font, and this just looks a little bit thicker, like it's almost a facsimile. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but that's kind of how I'm feeling. The margins are fine. The line spacing I like. This is another kind of thick boy book. This is about 800 something, maybe almost 900 pages. Let's see. Is this the end? Yeah, I think it's 855 pages. And then we have a list of characters, many of whom, again, are the same family as Stalingrad, so the Shapovchnikovs. Then we have them kind of separated into, if they're not family, how do we know them? So kind of location-based, so colleagues, concentration camp, Russian labor camp, power station, etc. And how they might relate to that original group. Yeah, okay. And then, and there's actually, I just wanted to note one thing here. Historical characters. So some of the characters in this book, like General Paulus and Hitler, in Stalingrad, Hitler is a character. You mute for a few chapters. Like, obviously those are real people, or, now deceased, but were, historical figures that people of the time would have known as they were reading this book. So it's kind of creating a narrative of some historical figures, but also of some fictional characters too, which also is done in War and Peace with, like Napoleon. You meet him for quite a few chapters as well. And then the end pages again. And lastly, why do people have memories? It would be easier to die, anything to stop remembering. So that's some dark stuff. Anyways, let me kind of pan up here and give you the, I'm not sure if my camera's actually going to be able to capture this because I'm at my work desk. Let's see. I might have to adjust my gimbal here a little. And apologies for what's happening? There we go. So apologies for my messy desk here. I was hoping to not capture this at all, but here's the full stack. And so you can see they really do look nice together. I really like how they all align. But anyways, that is my Russian classics. I hope you enjoyed, and tune in next time for some more books and budget. Thanks.